friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Gus Soups with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family podcast. We've got ourselves a tremendous podcast today as Ky McKeon. He does absolutely amazing work over at the Three-Man Weave. He is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about just some of the late preparation that we've got for the upcoming season, some of the last minute things that he does to be able to prepare for a campaign like this. We are going to be taking a look at some of those late landmines as well, how he's been taking in some of the waivers that have not been approved, like what happened with West Virginia and Raekwon Battle, the Cincinnati guys, taking a look at some of these injuries that might be a little bit critical coming into the season, and how he's gauging some of these scrimmage results that we have been seeing as well. Ky, one of the best out there over at the Three-Man Weave. He is going to be joining me in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, we really didn't get a lot of college basketball news on Wednesday. We did see a few reports of a few guys in the Big Ten, like Chucky Upper and Zed Key, that apparently got into a little bit of better shape in the offseason. Yippee, which, that's something where I want to see it out there on the floor a little bit more before being like, oh, he went on Weight Watchers and was able to drop 10 pounds or anything like that. But certainly something that I monitor. I really don't put a lot of stock into it until I actually see results with it, but we didn't see a lot there. But I do want to address something here in segment number 1 that I do think is very important, and I do want to be able to field your questions to be able to get you set for the upcoming season, because we are now, as I post up this podcast, 11 days away from the start of the college basketball season. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, please do fire those in one of two ways. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, maybe does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I know that some people have commented with this. Some people have been saying, hey, I've been spending a lot of my time taking a look at football. Some of you were getting set for NBA and NHL seasons as well, and you're wondering how to play the college basketball board. You want to be having some action on opening night, but you haven't been doing a lot of off-season research. And I think the biggest thing is, if you have not been doing a lot of college basketball off-season research, don't try to have the undertaking of looking at 362 teams in 11 days. It's one of those things where it's much like a college research project. You want to be doing it little by little. If you're trying to cram it all in one night, some of you might have been able to get away with it in college. I was not able to. When I was able to piecemeal things together, that's when I had my best results. That doesn't mean that you can't bet on college basketball opening night, though. What I would say is, if you have yet to really dive in on it, just focus on a few specific spots in general. Maybe that's a few conferences. Maybe that's just taking a look at unders that you like, or something like that, where you've had a track record of success. And I think that is something that is very key to do, because if you have yet to bet college basketball, obviously, you might not have a track record of success, whether that be to the positive or the negative. If you're just starting out, try to maybe go with regional teams where you're able to find some access to. Let's say you're living out in the state of Michigan, for example. Maybe you're close to Detroit, Oakland, the directional Michigan schools, taking a look at those MAC teams, taking a look at the Rising League, the Big Ten. That could be right up your wheelhouse. Things that you're able to prepare within about a week and a half, you're able to get the job done there. If you're out there in Michigan, you have yet to prepare for any teams, it might be a little bit more difficult to unearth information on, say, UC Santa Barbara or something like that. So I do think that that's a good way of being able to go about it. Try to work smarter, not harder, and just be able to acquire information as the season goes along. I know that there are a lot of very good handicappers that they don't necessarily dive in on the first few weeks of the college basketball season, because I know that with Shot Quality Bets, for example, they do absolutely amazing work. They're going to be diving in immediately with regards to college basketball season, but our good friend Justin Perry even told me that with regards to their NBA model, they want a few weeks of data before they dive in, and there's a lot of great college basketball handicappers. They're the exact same way. Without any data, it's a little bit hard to be able to decipher, and if you have yet to do a ton of research here in the off season, maybe just wait for a little bit of data to come out, and then once you find some of those trends, once you find some of those teams that they've been having some home and road splits, maybe there's a team that just throughout time, they've been rough in non-conference play. They've been able to rise up in conference play, looking at things like that. So I do think that it is big to be a little bit more situational if you have yet to dive in. If you, like myself, have been looking at college basketball every stinking day, you've been preparing for this for a very, very long time. You are waiting very, very anxiously for the season to be able to get going. So, I mean, there are those of us that are in that boat, but there are some of you guys that you've got other irons in the fire. Hey, sometimes life just gets in the way in general. That is completely understood, and money is money. Whether you're cashing in on 3 smaller bets, 3 larger bets, 3 medium-sized bets, 100 small, medium, large bets, it's just all about trying to be able to find you guys some money, being able to help out with your bankroll. I'll be with you guys every single day during the season, big card, small card, off season, regular season, always here for you guys. So please do fire in those questions. Hopefully this was a little bit of a nice words of wisdom and nice pieces of advice sort of segment for you guys. And coming next, we do have one of the best in the business joining me, Ky McKeon. He does absolutely tremendous work over at the 3-Man Weave. We're going to be talking about how he's getting set for the upcoming season, a few teams that he's starting to feel a little bit more bullish/bearish on, and so much more right here on Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast, and it is great to be joined by this man. Ky McKeon does absolutely tremendous work over at the 3-Man Weave. You're able to follow them on Twitter/X at the number 3MW_CBB. And with Ky, he does absolutely excellent work taking a look at this great game that we all know and love. He's over there doing some work with the Field of 68 Action Network along with his great work over at 3-Man Weave. He is based out there in the Midwest. Did a great job contributing to the College Basketball Almanac, and a man that you're able to follow on Twitter/X at Ky, the underscore after that, and then the number 3 and MW. And Ky, always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me, Ky. And Ky, we are now down to there being a little bit over a week and a half away from the start of the upcoming college basketball season. And what's sort of your process right now for getting set for the upcoming season? Because as we know, the college basketball season, it began in April, and certainly there's been a lot of time to prepare. And if you have yet to be taking a look as to what UConn's roster is going to be looking like right now, you might want to be taking a little bit of time before you place some of those early season college basketball bets. But what is sort of the process for you right now? Because I do think that a lot of the bulk work should be done right now, but certainly there's a lot of I-dotting and T-crossing, to use a little bit of an analogy, to be done before the start of the season.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, I still have a couple teams left to rate. I rate teams throughout the last several months here, but the T-crossing, the I-dotting, that's exact time period is for this 1 or 2 weeks leading up to the season. Catching injuries I might have missed. Looking at scrimmage results, but certainly not, or taking them with a full truth, we'll say. But yeah, basically just making sure I haven't missed anything, and then maybe reassessing ratings I did earlier on in the summer and seeing if my opinions have changed, while also not trying to be too groupthinky with, you know, polls out there now that KenPom's out there, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but I do think that that is so important to be doing. And is there maybe a team or two that, as you just go back over them a little bit more, you do have a little bit of change of opinion, whether that be to the positive or the negative, or it might not even be positive or negative. It might just be maybe you thought they were going to be a little bit more guard heavy, but as you look at it a little bit more, you think, all right, my rating on them is relatively the same, but they might be a little bit more up-tempo than I was expecting, or something of that nature.
There's always teams that I feel like I was a little bit wrong on when I first evaluated them. You know, Maryland comes to mind. I think I was a little low on them at first. I don't know why necessarily. I'm not the biggest Kevin Willard guy, but I do respect him. He had a great season last year, but the more I've kind of looked at their roster, looked at the freshmen coming in, I've started to kind of warm up to them. Fortunately, That's an opinion held by many out there, and the market will probably adjust for it, but I think it's correct to have them higher than I initially did.
Yeah, and with Maryland, I do think that they're going to be such an intriguing team because they do lose a few pieces from a season ago, but they maintain much of the fulcrum of that backcourt. They bring back someone like Dante Scott, who I really like, and on top of that, I do think that they bring in some nice new pieces to be able to help them elevate as well. As joining me on the show, we do have Ky McKeon, who does amazing work over at the three-man weave, and you just talked about Maryland. And how hard is it for you to really gauge what is going to be, once again, a very interesting middle of the Big Ten? Because I do think that you've obviously got those big two teams with Michigan State, Purdue. These are obviously your top two teams. I've got Purdue number 1, Michigan State number 2, and then from there, it does become a case where do you like, for instance, like in Illinois at number 3? I do think that Michigan is going to have a relatively solid year. I think I initially called Michigan State Michigan, but that said, I do think that the Wolverines are going to have a solid year. But once again, much like we always see in the Big Ten, with regards to, I'm going to call it 3 through like 8 or 9, I feel like there is going to be a big log jam, and it's sort of a choose your own adventure and pick which style you like / dislike the most.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big mess in the middle, so can't really go wrong. I think Purdue is a tier above. I think Michigan State on that tier as well. And then you can convince me almost any other way how the next several teams go, with the exception of Minnesota. I think Minnesota's bringing up the rear there. But even teams like Nebraska and Penn State are a little bit intriguing and could argue they can finish above certain teams in the league. Who you have third could vary between 5 people. If you ask, they might give you 5 different answers. So it's a really competitive league, as we're kind of used to. I think it's an improved league top to bottom, and certainly one that's pretty tough to rate, at least in the preseason.
Oh, yes, it is very much a difficult league to rate. I think the easiest rankings to make is putting Purdue at number 1 and Minnesota at dead last, and then, well, you get 2 through 13. I do think that that's where the real intrigue does come in. So I completely agree with you there, and this is a team that's so hard to evaluate as we go from the Big Ten to the Big 12 because, there's just been so many moving parts. It's been such a tumultuous offseason, and it just continues for these guys. And I'm talking about West Virginia with them having Raekwon Battle getting his waiver denied. And I think it's just two-pronged with West Virginia. For one, Raekwon Battle I thought was going to be a starter for them. And two, it's just another body that they don't have. And West Virginia can't afford to lose depth. Even if they were to lose like a key reserve or something like that, I thought that would put them behind the 8 ball. But let alone losing a guy that recognized it was at Montana State, but was putting up 17.5 points per game, was a top scorer for a team that made the NCAA tournament this past season. I think that this is a big blow for a West Virginia team that it just feels like nothing has went right for them the last about 4 or so months.
Yeah, he was enormous. Him in the line changes things. So now that he doesn't have a waiver, it's getting kind of bleak for West Virginia, and I don't think they expect to have Noah Farrakhan. I think maybe even Silverio's waiting on a waiver. I think one more guy is waiting on a waiver. Yeah, it's a brand new coach, obviously, Josh Eilert, who took under unfortunate circumstances with Bob Huggins getting fired, and it's a bunch of transfers. It's 2 guys back who played meaningful minutes, and it's a bunch of transfers that may or may not fit well. There's certainly talent on the team. But without a guy like Battle who could score, create his own shot, I think they might be a little bit in trouble, at least to start the year.
And I do think that it is going to be interesting to evaluate some of the bottom teams out in the Big 12. As joining me on the show, we do have Ky McKeon, who does amazing work over at the three-man weave, because year in and year out, the Big 12 has been known as the most deep league in all of college basketball, and I do think that they should be that once again this year. But as we know, Central Florida is coming into the mix, and while I don't think that Central Florida is necessarily as bad as, say, a Minnesota we were talking about a little bit before, they certainly do not help out the overall product of the Big 12, in my opinion. But we talk about West Virginia, all the losses that they take, and on top of that, about a week or so ago, we saw Cincinnati and their 2 big men get denied a waiver as well, Aziz Bandango, along with Jamile Reynolds. And I do think that for Cincinnati, it's also going to be a little bit of a tough transition for them. And unlike what we've seen in past years for the Big 12, I do think that there are going to be a few teams that are going to be outside that KenPom say top 60, top 70.
Yeah, I would agree. I think West Virginia's there. You mentioned UCF. And yeah, really unfortunate about Cincinnati. Bandago officially, no waiver is tough. I think they're really banking on him. And they still have Victor Locken in there, but their depth really takes a hit with him and Reynolds not through the waivers. I was kind of higher on Cincinnati, assuming those guys were in. And I still kind of like the starting lineup and maybe a couple guys off the bench. But this isn't the American anymore. This is the Big 12. So it seems like they're kind of destined for the bottom of the barrel in the league. Unfortunate for Wes Miller, but I'm sure he'll have the program, competing in the Big 12 sooner rather than later.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I think that he does an absolutely amazing job. Mr. Miller does of being able to coach up this team. I really like the way that he goes about it, but it's just a rough hand to be dealt. Not only one, but two guys not getting those waivers. That is going to be exceptionally difficult. And what I think is also exceptionally difficult this time of year is trying to make sense of everything that is coming out on the old social media, because we're seeing a lot about these, and I air quotes here, secret scrimmages, which I have said this on the podcast all week long, and I'll continue to say it. How do we keep calling them secret scrimmages? Because there's people in attendance on darn near all of them. There's video of a lot of these scrimmages as well. So, the secret has gotten out, guys. We could just call them scrimmages if we want to. But that said, what have you made out of some of these scrimmages? And are these things where you really don't make anything out of them? Do you make a lot out of them? Or is it somewhere in between for you?
Probably somewhere in between. Certain results I will take into account. If I didn't have a lot of confidence in a team going into the year, or they have a lot of uncertainty or a lot of moving pieces, I might pay more attention to their results. Now you got to be careful, because a lot of times all the players don't play in these. UCLA, for instance, just lost. I forgot who they played, but 3 of their best players were out. So it needs to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt there. But no, I definitely pay attention to them. I'm not taking their word as gospel. I'm not taking the results as fact. And again, it's one game in an exhibition standpoint. You wouldn't necessarily change a team's rating right away from the first game of the season, so probably shouldn't overreact to an exhibition game, but still definitely good to pay attention, at least take them into consideration.
Yep, I agree with you, and I am looking a little bit more at things like tempo, because I take a look at a scrimmage that we got on Monday. It was the UCLA versus Santa Clara scrimmage, and that was a game where neither team exceeded 65 points. As we know, UCLA, more of a defense-oriented, a little bit more of a slow, grinded-out team. Santa Clara, they were a team that they were playing at warp speed last season. They were putting up a whole bunch of points. That's something where I think we might be able to get a little bit of value with regards to Santa Clara unders. And on top of that, Adam Bona being out of the fold, that was something that I really took away from that as well, because in terms of just these scrimmages, I don't necessarily take a look at the final score as much as I take a look at who did not play, and that's something that is now all of a sudden on my radar. But I do think that those are the sorts of things to be taking a look at. Guys that are out of the fold, and perhaps a little bit of a tempo shift, I think we might see a little bit with Santa Clara this year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, pay attention to how teams do out of the lineup, pay attention who is out of the lineup, and maybe it's a lingering injury, for instance, that you might need to account for when the real season starts. As far as Santa Clara, it's kind of strange. Sendek, he all of a sudden went to an up-tempo offense a couple years ago after playing sort of a slower style. I think he's really a good coach. I think he really plays well to his personnel, and obviously he's had the fortune of having a couple lottery picks somehow, or just about the last couple years out of nowhere. It's tough to kind of bet against them. There was a time where Santa Clara was rated every year, but these last couple of years, it's been profitable to be with the Bronx. And that win against UCLA, albeit with guys out, was still pretty impressive, and I will be paying attention to them.
Yep, absolutely. And again, I do think that it is very much worth monitoring whether or not Adam Bona is going to be out there in the fold night number one, because that's a little bit of a takeaway that I have as Ky McKeon, who does tremendous work over at the 3-Man Weave. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I think that that's the biggest thing with regards to getting prepared for opening night right now, because I was talking a few minutes ago about crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and I think a big part of what we do right now is not necessarily trying to be like, all right, the team last year scored X amount of points per possession and everything like that. It's just trying to be able to get things straightened out with regards to these rosters, trying to figure out these late injuries, these last-second guys that are not getting waivers, because I do think that those can be the differences between finding a half a point of value and maybe finding more like a 1.5 to 2 points of value, to where you go from a non-bet to a bet on a game. And I think that that's just what is so important about these secret scrimmages, because when you take a look at the box score, which typically it is provided with a lot of these, when you figure out who's not in the fold, I think that that's actually of a very big advantage. And that's what I take a look at the most with regards to this time of year in these scrimmages.
Yeah, huge. The eligibility stuff's going to be really, really big for these first couple of games. The news, it's not great, especially at these lower levels. Teams aren't covered very well. They're not going to be caught by even the automated Twitter accounts that do a pretty good job of tracking injuries. So if you can figure it out before the market does, it's a huge advantage, especially certain players that would have big impacts on their team if they were eligible.
Yep, I'm right there with you, and it is certainly a time of year where it's the hunting and gathering time of year. We're trying to hunt for injury information, we're trying to hunt for edges, and then gather up the winners. And Ky, you always do a great job on this front. You and everyone else over there at the three-man weave, Jim and Matt, you guys are so hard at work getting stuff for the upcoming season. I know that you guys did a great job with the Almanac. I know that you guys have been doing some conference previews and podcast form of your own with the three-man weave podcast, which people are able to get where they find this fine podcast. And I know you've got a lot of irons in the fire. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can follow Three-Man Weave at 3MW_CBB. We've got the Almanac out, the best college basketball preseason prep I think you can buy, cbbalmanac.com. Check it out there, and check out our Twitter for all of our stuff during the season.
And Ky does an absolutely tremendous job. All three gentlemen at the three-man weave do an absolutely tremendous job, and it is always very much appreciated to get them on the podcast. So a big thanks to Ky for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways you fire those in. First is my Twitter / X timeline at GNRS41. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast. Find that 5-star review. We are getting set for what is going to be a tremendous college basketball season. I've already done conference previews in podcast form for all 32 conferences. So, wherever you're getting your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, list goes on and on. If there is a specific conference preview that you want to take a look at, they're all organized with the name of the conference at the front end. So we've got you guys all covered there. We're a week and a half away from the start of the college basketball season. It is going to be a glorious one, and I appreciate you guys tuning in every single day. Once we get in season, you're going to get picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So very much looking forward to it, and I always look forward to being able to come at you guys, which I will do every single day. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I'll be back with you once again tomorrow.